Na pesquisa de um acontecimento histórico, encontrei sempre duas realidades: a realidade oficial e a realidade oculta. O objetivo deste canal é apresentar-lhe essas duas realidades. Espero que o mesmo o ajude a libertar-se do condicionalismo universal de pensamento único das massas. Desfrute. Torne-se um pensador livre. Bem-vindo ao canal Eugenia Mental.
The environment. It's a film about saving ourselves. Because whatever one's environmental, political, or religious opinions, whatever one's race, sex, or economic standing, whomever of us goes without water for a week cries blood.
There is always a lot of focus on, well, what's the environmental impact? And that's a perfectly valid issue and concern. The abuse of water and the taking of excessive water, diminishing flows and levels, can destroy the sustainability of ecosystems. But we can't, in the name of preventing environmental impacts, there's a mentality that says, well, as long as we're not causing any significant impacts, we should be able to use the water any way we want, including selling it, exporting it for private gain of a few. When it's all said and done, people need water to survive. That's what the bottom line is.
When we search the universe for life, we search for water. Because it is only from liquid water that all known forms of life exist. The blue planet. The only planet known to harbor life. The only planet known to be flowing with water. Water management has always been of key importance to humans. The Egyptians depended entirely upon the Nile. The Romans expanded the boundaries of engineering to use gravity to bring water to their cities. Ancient societies cherished water, molded their lives around it, and even worshipped it as a god. For whatever reason, between 800 and 1000 AD, climate change dried up most of the Mayans' local water supply. Farmers were forced to extend their agriculture into the jungle forests to grow food. There was not enough water for both the crops and trees, so the forests died. The soil eroded, air humidity decreased, food decreased. Mayan leaders prayed to the god of rain, but the regular rain season brought little water. The hydrologic cycle was damaged. Life in the cities became less civilized, as the main focus of Mayan life became providing food and water. People abandoned the cities to begin a new life in the forests, in hopes that there was still a sustainable watershed there. There wasn't. But as we enter a new era combining high technology with the demands of global economic trade, we're entering into a unique stage of history.
Water, which is the source of life itself, instead of being common and universal to everybody because we all depend on it, profit is made out of the running of and the delivery of water to people and to communities. Those that have the ability to pay will have access to the water. Those who do not have the ability to pay will go without. And therefore it's a life and death situation in the final analysis on the basis
friends, about a global water crisis in which we know that the world is actually running out of water.
And that wasn't supposed to happen. It wasn't supposed to be able to happen because we were all taught back in, I don't know, grade 3 or 6 or whatever, that there's a cycle.
When it rains, the water falls from the clouds down all the way to the ground. It soaks into the ground and then the grass and trees grow. Sometimes there's so much water underground that lakes and rivers just pop up, like when you squeeze a box of apple juice. The rivers carry the water back to the ocean. Inside the ocean, the water floats up to the sky as clouds again. Then the wind pushes the clouds towards the land and it rains again. This all happens over and over, forever and ever.
How is our water being polluted? Agriculture uses chemicals to increase farming productivity. Ironically implemented to counter a diminishing water supply, these chemicals pollute the groundwater. Winds and flooding damage. Automobile gas emissions pollute the clouds, essentially hardening it to the point perhaps the most damaging cannot easily soak into the ground. Our life source literally slips away from us, back into the ocean through sewers and rivers, draining the land of its moisture and life.
Krajina, ktorú človek vysušuje, sa mení zo zelenej na žltú a výsledkom potom je, že všetká voda je skumulovaná v oceáne.
Extreme weather, a world of hurricanes and violent storms over the ocean, while the interior land receives less and less rain, or violent harsh storms that simply erode the land more.
Zemská kôra kontinentu odľahčuje a príspevok kumulácie tejto vody v oceánoch spôsobuje zaťaženie zemskej pôdy, čo môže spôsobiť pnutie v štruktúrách zemskej kôry a to spôsobuje zemetrasenie a potenciálne možné tsunami vlny, ktoré sme boli svedkami v roku 2004.
Deforestation is a major contributor to soil erosion. Tree roots absorb water and thus hold the watershed in place. When they leave the land, so does the water.
Because the forests that held the water have all been logged, there is no place where the water can be stored. The rain still comes and runs away as instant surface runoff.
Just what I feared. He's formed a gang, and they're whooping it up for a flash flood. They're rushing down the canyon. They've made a wall of water 20 feet high. Look out! No longer satisfied with flash floods, the gang is planning bigger and wetter floods. Junior's getting dangerous. He's getting tougher and bolder every day.
But groundwater pumping cannot alone be blamed for our desertification crisis.
Cities are growing and expanding. For the first time in human history, more people living in cities than in the countryside.
We have replaced permeable ground with hardscape, with roofs, with parking lots, with homes.
If it rains and the water doesn't hit the ground but hits the sidewalk or street instead, it can't soak into the ground and make trees. It just slides down the street back to the ocean and makes more clouds. This means that the ground gets really dry and the grass and trees die.
Clearly, there is much more unpaved than paved land in the world, but the effect is cumulative and should not be underestimated.
Celosvetovo zhruba 750 miliard kubíkov vody. Tento proces sa odštartoval po druhej svetovej vojne. Dá sa povedať, že teraz sme v polčase rozpadu vodného cyklu a o 50 rokov bude vlastne definitívny kolaps s vodnými zdrojami na globálnej úrovni.
There is another problem with increased urbanization, which is our continued insistence to build housing for growing populations that demand more water than local watersheds can provide.
People in the housing development and they make money by turning houses, and they're very large companies. So their goal is to avoid the water issue that might limit the number of houses they might have.
Instead of adapting our development to the available water supply of a region, we choose to force the world's water supply to adapt to our desired locations.
What dams do is change the hydrologic cycle. They provide water during those months when the natural flow patterns do not.
What's happened is that we built these huge hydro dams mainly to create hydropower and hydroelectricity. And when we've done that, we've done it in a very narrow framework, and we haven't thought about the fact that we're going to need water for other purposes.
In this quest to conquer nature, as some label it, we've constructed close to 50,000 large dams worldwide. But if we are headed towards desertification by allowing too much rainwater to run off into the sea, then is it not to our benefit to dam water and prevent it from reaching the sea?
One of the basic functions of rivers is to carry stuff from one place to another. And that stuff, which is really critical to the health of an entire watershed, it becomes completely and wholly interrupted when you build a dam.
Dammed rivers fail to carry such nutrients and minerals downstream through the watershed, resulting in more soil erosion, less percolation when it rains, more runoff, and thus an increase in the desertification problem.
When you trap water, it stops moving, and when it stops moving, it heats up because it's this nice warm soup full of nutrients that are not making it downstream. But then those things die, and then they eat up oxygen. All of a sudden, you've got a major water quality problem.
A river is the lifeblood of an ecosystem, just like the veins and arteries bring blood to every part of our organism. When we have choked arteries,
corporations. The Water Division of Suez has 400,000 employees. Try saying no to them if you're a little third world country, right?
So that one day every single drop of fresh water in the world will be privately owned and controlled.
Up until the 1980s, really, if water was privatized, they were companies within a country. So France was mostly privatized, but the companies that then became the giants were just French companies delivering water locally.
Water privatization in France, because of the multinationals that are so powerful there, and because of their long history there, is so ingrained that even the president of France wasn't able to stop it.
François, à un certain moment de son mandat, a été rappelé à l'ordre, si je puis dire, par cette dictature économique, et il n'a pas pu nationaliser les entreprises de l'eau. C'est un système qui est très puissant, c'est une machine qui est sans état d'âme.
And then in the 1980s, Margaret Thatcher came to power, and the Thatcher Revolution came into effect, and she privatized all the water in Great Britain. And that's when these big companies decided that they could start going global. At the same time, the UN was beginning to explore the language of water as an economic good and a commodity. And the very first time was at a very important conference in Dublin in 1992, which for the first time named water as a good. So you get the Thatcher-Reagan market economy ideology growing over here. You've got the companies all ready to go because they've been delivering inside nation states. And now you've got the UN saying, okay, we're ready to start thinking about water differently. It's not a right. So it all kind of converged together. Well, the World Bank is created after the Second World War to bring financial stability and development to the developing world. And it's supposed to be pooled money from the wealthier countries to help develop the global south. However, what's happened is that the World Bank has hooked up with the three big water private service companies in Europe. They basically started to work their way into the developing world. And the World Bank would say, in exchange for debt relief, the WTO comes in with rules that basically establish this in a new constitutional framework. It's run by what's called the Quad, which is the United States, Canada, the European Union, and Japan. And the Quad makes all the decisions. It's their corporations that set the agenda. They decide when the meetings are going to be held. And they had thousands of military police with the full riot gear and so on. And the farmers had a huge march. And the head of South Korean Farmers Union is a man named Lee Kyung-hae. And he came from a devastated community where people were killing themselves. He climbed up on this police barricade. He took a knife and stabbed himself in the heart, walked back and forth on top of this fence, and fell. He died a couple of hours later in the hospital. And this became an enormously important symbol. These trade rules are not some dry academic thing on a piece of paper. These are rules that affect people's lives, and these are rules that are killing people. This is the new colonialism. It doesn't come in ships.
We've heard the facts at this meeting. We've heard about the underachievement and the failures of privatization. And we know that ultimately these corporations aren't accountable to the communities that they serve. They're accountable to their shareholders, and nothing's going to change that.
People think that water privatization is just a problem in the global south and the developing world, but that's just simply not the case. We have the very same situation in the U.S. It's the very same story, whether it's in Atlanta, Georgia, or Buenos Aires, Argentina.
It was a big push at the time. Privatization was the word. Everybody wanted to privatize something. And frankly, I'm not opposed to privatization. We privatize our recycling pickup, but this water was different. But we did sign a contract with United Water for 20 years for operation and maintenance of our water system.
For these companies, when their name has been tarnished because of their malpractice and their mismanagement, it can be a big advantage to use another name. Suez often uses the name Ondeo, and very rarely the brand Suez is visible. And the same, of course, with Vivendi. Vivendi had gained a very bad reputation because of their records in failed privatization and mismanagement. And they were suddenly reinvented under this name Veolia, and a huge advertising budget was spent to create a positive feeling around this new brand name. Of course, advertising is a crucial factor in the way these companies are trying to save their image.
And almost immediately started having service problems, and citizens could not drink the water unless it had been boiled. They take all of our 550 employees for labor reasons.
They usually slash the workforce, sometimes in half.
So they cut out about 200 employees, and that could have been part of the reason for the service delivery.
They couldn't find out where all the piping connections were. The workers themselves were the people that knew where things were.
The mayor at the time was Bill Campbell, and Suez gave him a $6,900 campaign contribution, but he wasn't running for office. A trip to Paris where he and a female companion stayed in the best hotels and were wined and dined.
Although two of the three water corporate giants are based in France, and French water has been privatized since the time of Napoleon, a small percentage of French regions have maintained their own water distribution through their city councils. The city of Grenoble managed its own water for over a century, providing good quality water at low prices to consumers.
Suez bribed our mayor. Le maire de Grenoble a choisi de privatiser à Lyonnaise des Eaux Suez. Tous les services publics sont bien moins chers que les services privatisés.
There hasn't been one example in the world where there hasn't been a hike in the water rates.
Il n'y avait aucune raison logique de privatiser ce service qui marchait très bien. Sa décision de privatisation était en échange d'avantages personnels.
Not many people know that prior to being president, Vicente Fox was the general manager for Coca-Cola in Latin America. So Coca-Cola received some of the largest water concessions in Mexico during the Fox administration.
And this is something that really needs to be opened up for serious debate. People do not realize the extent to which there is a direct giveaway on the part of governments of water resources and services to industries locating in their jurisdiction.
Well, I want to be very clear about the situation in Mexico that President Vicente Fox has given us no special favors on water issues or anything else along that line.
The largest water concession given by the government in the whole country was to a Coca-Cola bottling plant. It takes as much water as it wants. You could say that Coca-Cola ruled Mexico.
In this country, you have to pay more for this water than you pay for the same amount of Coca-Cola. So that's something.
Dasani is in plastic bottles, and Coca-Cola are in glass bottles. Now, when you look at the price difference, what you're looking at is that the cost of producing those bottles is much higher. We have looked at, in the past, bottling Dasani in the glass, but The plastic package is becoming very popular now, and what we're looking at is what the customers want. As you look at new ways to develop business, you look at also what the customer wants and needs are. The situation with the cost of Dasani is more about the packaging, and also plastic bottles are taxed at a higher rate than glass bottles.
Wall Street per se understands in 50 years this is the commodity to be invested in. There's a sunset out there, there's a horizon out there that's coming closer and closer for oil, but not for water.
There are at least a dozen publicly traded water indexes that deal only with water, trading it on the open stock market.
Possible. The question still remains, why? Why forfeit the water we already currently have? Why freely give it to others only so they can sell it back to us at whatever cost the demand allows?
When you have communities that are looking to extend their water supplies, they'll pay what they feel the value of that supply is worth.
There are 87 corporations now building desalination plants, and the biggest water company of all is General Electric, followed by Procter & Gamble and Dow Chemicals getting into it. These are all companies
some investors will
that
require 30. And if you can't offer 30, they're not interested in investing.
What we actually have is that these big corporations are going to profit from dirty water. So they don't want to see the pollutants not going into the water in the first place. They want to have a model where they can step in and provide very expensive technologies to clean up pollution after it occurs.
I wondered when I looked at the UN Millennium Goals why they didn't include goals around pollution and cracking down on the fact that if you can't use the rivers and lakes in your area, then you're forced to mine groundwater. Well, it's as clear as a bell to me now. It's because they're raking in the money. Who's going to own that water? When General Electric has it to clean, does it pass through them but still belong to the public? I don't think so.
So it becomes a product that is a result of your process, and then you own it.
Who ends up owning these desal plants? Because if these desal plants are in private hands or even in government hands, because after all, water is the source of life. If these desal plants are the way in which we get access to water, then those desal plants and who owns them ends up controlling our lives.
That are sold in Europe, and they export them. And they're grown around a beautiful, beautiful lake called Lake Navasha, which is being depleted at an appalling rate.
All done by foreign corporations, huge, great big flower plantations. If they keep doing this, within 5 years it will be a putrid puddle. So here's one of the driest continents on Earth, exporting water, being told by the World Bank to export.
Why are they unable to build their own infrastructure of clean water delivery? Why are they poor?
Developing countries are forced to grow cash crops, export crops like tea or coffee.
We've got some resources, especially tea, which is really growing all over. The World Bank and the IMF and the other countries, especially the Western world, that buys the tea from our country always gives us a raw deal. You find that we are given so little money for this tea.
The World Trade Organization has required developing countries to remove tariffs so that products can flow in and out of the country because it benefits our corporations. They get cheap products. Now what that means is that developing countries are very hurt.
Where a very senior World Bank official told the US Senate, don't worry, we're not giving money away, particularly for every dollar the United States invests in the developing world through the World Bank. American corporations get back $1.30. You know, wink, wink. We call it aid, development aid, but really it's forcing countries to open up their resources.
For instance, comes from Latin meaning river. The rivals were people standing on either side of the river throwing things at each other.
And you're just going to see more of that as the technology develops to be able to suck water out of the atmosphere. Now you're going to find water from the atmosphere in clouds being stolen.
New techniques for controlling the weather are being tried. When conditions are right,
Rain is made to fall by seeding clouds with dry ice or silver iodine.
It's happening in China and some other places where a particular village pays for a plane to go up.
In Bolivia.
Obrero industrial y cuando en Bolivia se privatizó el agua, la gente, nosotros no podíamos concebir que un empresario privado, un inversionista transnacional, podía apropiarse del agua. Es decir, la gente o tenía que pagar del agua o tenía que dejar de comer y por lo tanto no tuvo otra alternativa que decir no a la privatización del agua. Una rebelión popular, una forma organizativa de multitudes de gente que desde los campesinos hasta los vendedores de las calles y empezamos una resistencia. El gobierno sacó al ejército y a la policía para garantizar la seguridad jurídica de la empresa, garantizar las utilidades y las ganancias de la compañía.
But it's really interesting because you know the World Bank has imposed the same kind of private control and takeover of many other things in developing countries. Healthcare, education, their energy sector, their mines and so on. But when it comes to water, something happens and people say, I couldn't stop you there, or I didn't know how, or I thought maybe you would be right, but you are not taking my local water.
Asociados de una abierta complicidad de los gobernantes en ese tiempo en Bolivia, que inclusive se privatizó el agua de la lluvia, es decir, que se prohibía a la gente el acumular el agua de la lluvia.
And this is where you get the civil wars because the army is brought in to control local dissent against these transnational corporations. Who are you protecting? There's your people without drinking water and you're protecting foreign investors from North America and Europe?
Más de 100 heridos de bala, numerosos detenidos. Civil, hubieron más de 20 francotiradores que mataron e hirieron a la gente.
17-year-old Victor Hugo Doza was killed by a shot through his face.
Na pesquisa de um acontecimento histórico, encontrei sempre duas realidades: a realidade oficial e a realidade oculta. O objetivo deste canal é apresentar-lhe essas duas realidades. Espero que o mesmo o ajude a libertar-se do condicionalismo universal de pensamento único das massas. Desfrute. Torne-se um pensador livre. Bem-vindo ao canal Eugenia Mental.